The COVID-19 pandemic, as we know, has caused a dramatic and sudden shift in the education process on the island. Schools have been closed since the middle of March, and online or e-learning platforms have been used to facilitate the teaching of students on island. So today I'll be speaking with education officials, namely the Minister of Education, Honorable Charles T. Kernan, the Permanent Secretary acting in the Ministry of Education, Mr. Liston Skerritt, and the Director of Education, Dr. Gregory Julius, about education on Montserrat in light of the COVID-19 situation. Good morning to you all, and I trust that you're all keeping well.
We are keeping well.
Good to hear. Minister, I will first allow you to express the ministry's position on education on Montserrat since this crisis began.
Thank you. I believe you've been hearing my voice, but strictly on health. But there is also education, and this morning I'll do an overview and the technicians will deal with the putting on the meat to that overview. But first, let me give thanks to the Almighty God for His divine providence during this season of uncertainty called COVID-19. In every crisis, there are lessons to be learned, changes to make, and adjustments to make. So it is, the education system is no different, and they will not be the same after this. Granted, we were already in the process of updating the way we deliver education through ICT. So COVID has just speeded up somewhat. As an overview, however, looking at education under emergency, the Ministry of Education continues to support students and teachers during the closure of schools which started on March 13, 2020. Educational institutions will remain closed until May 1st and manage operations thereafter within the guidelines presented by the Ministry of Health and Social Services. This is a challenging but needed decision to manage the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. Best efforts are in place to maintain basic education through a variety of e-learning platforms, social media, and printed resources. This will continue into the next phase of the island's shutdown. I want to thank the students, parents, and the educational partners, the teachers, who have assisted in the maintenance of the operations to date and support given to ensure the engagement of our future generation. Education packages. The government primary schools will once again prepare printed packages for student education over the next shutdown cycle. These are now ready for pickup. Parents who are out shopping on that today are asked to pick up packages from Lookout Primary School, Braids Primary School, within 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. The other packages will be delivered to the homes of the children in the next 2 days. Teachers will continue to support through classroom, WhatsApp groups, and e-learning platforms. The Ministry of Education endorses the use of Flow One-on-One to support the instruction of students for the CSEC and CAPE. The platform at flowstudy.com is now free to students, teachers, and lecturers. The platform includes modules, videos, and learning content for CSEC and CAPE. Future updates will include content for primary school. Another resource for the secondary school students is the OECS Learning Hub through Notemaster. Efforts are also being supported to enhance training for teachers to increase the quality of e-learning through a partnership with UE Open Campus. The ministry recognizes that there are some challenges with access to Wi-Fi and appropriate hardware for online delivery. Projects and initiatives are on the way to address these gaps and ensure accessibility is increased for all students. This includes the establishment of a revised laptop project for vulnerable students in need. Implications for assessment. The ministry continues to monitor the position of the Caribbean Examination Council regarding the delivery of the regional exams. It has been decided that the island will not participate in this year's Caribbean Primary Exit Assessment CPEA exam. A local assessment will be used to evaluate student performance and define placement upon progression of grade 6 student to the Montserrat Secondary School and include leveling elements. The Caribbean Examination Council CXC March 26, 20 press release advised of the intentions to adjust the format, schedule, and delivery medium of annual exam. The ministry does not support the proposal and is keen to discuss an option which follows the advice of local health care specialists and reflects the current ICT infrastructure on island for examination. The ministry will continue to liaise with CXC regarding the exams. Transitioning and reopening. The ministry is making preparation for the reopening of school after the lockdowns. This includes consideration for student and teacher safety. The Ministry of Education expresses its appreciation for all stakeholders who have assisted with continued education through this pandemic. All are encouraged to adhere to the advice and directive by the Government of Montserrat and the Ministry of Health and Social Services. Remember, let us all contain the spread of COVID-19. We are all in this together. Thank you.
Minister, thank you very much for that comprehensive overview. You would have highlighted some of what I would be asking in your response, but of course we have to dissect the information and discuss it a bit more so that persons are clear. So clearly you would have spoke to how the learning is being facilitated, but I just want us to go over that at this point. What platforms or programs are being used at the moment to facilitate e-learning?
So the variety of platforms are being used by several schools and teachers. I think most popular is the use of WhatsApp groups by classes and teachers for communication with parents. And at the secondary by subject, we're seeing WhatsApp groups. Even at the college, I want to take a moment to just say thank you again to the work by Mrs. KB and her team. They're utilizing Zoom Classroom as well. Google Classroom is also being used, Classroom Dojo. But what we recognize, as the minister alluded to, is that we do have some challenges. And so we're also trying to make sure we have different modalities. So today, from yesterday, teachers would have been submitting work for primary schools and printing packages. So we're recognizing that there is a gap and that we need to have different ways of making sure we meet every student's need. So the primary ones are Google Classroom and Zoom, but we're also making sure that we address the needs by doing the printed packages.
Okay, that's good to hear, because one of the questions I had here was concerns raised by some persons as it relates to students being able to access the online learning platforms. But you're now saying that printed packages will be made available or are being made available for primary school. In terms of the secondary level, what will happen in those instances? Right.
So the team at secondary are reporting on a weekly basis, and Mrs. Hogan has coordinated that where they're reporting if there's gaps and challenges. We're paying attention to student engagement, who are responding, who are following up with the assignments, and that's informing our decisions. So far, we are realizing that most of the students do have access at that level. And that's why we also recognize the need to bring back the laptop project. So that addresses the hardware needs, but then we're working with our partners in Digicel and Flow to see if we can address the Wi-Fi. I think that's a national challenge right now with the number of people at home on those systems. The bandwidth tends to be inconsistent. There's not much you can do from our side, but I know they're working on it to try to make sure that it's more secure and consistent.
Okay. I will need you to expound a little bit more on the laptop project. But before we do that, it's important for me to establish whether or not the Ministry of Education has been capturing data on how many students in the government schools, specifically at the primary and secondary levels, that have actually been participating in the classes and the e-learning over the past few weeks.
Yes, Leona. That's one of the reasons when we had our last two virtual meetings, we impressed on the principals as the main persons guiding that process to give us actual data as it relates to the number of students and engaging in the e-learning process. And one of the reasons for this also is that there are external agencies who are willing to support us. And the first question they keep on asking is the numbers. What are the numbers? So, for example, Braids was able to report that you had 2 to 5 students who were not engaging in the process. And they made the extra effort by utilizing the social services to get them on board to support those particular parents, because they were dealing with some social issues and you had to find where they were living. So it is important for Montserrat Secondary School and also the other primary schools to give us that information, because they're the ones who are engaging with the teachers day to day. So it's not just only the packages in terms of the learning process, but how many children are really enrolled in the package. So while we may have the number of students, 157 thereabout for Braids, 120 for Lookout, and so on, we need to know exactly, because that is what will help us to really address the challenges, especially those who are not engaging. Because it's not only just having the package, because when we do reopen, it will give us an idea as to what other support mechanism we may put in place, because if children are not engaging in whatever process we have, it has implications for them to continue, and what sort of remediation and support we have to put in place for continuation, because assessment will come later on, and if students are not engaged, it will surely show up on the assessment. So, as I said, it is for the principals to give us that information. We have some information, but we need a lot more information in details as to the number of students per class, per form, whether it's secondary school, that are engaged or not engaged.
So what I'm gathering from you there is that the ministry in some instances has already begun to capture very quickly those who were not participating, and steps have been taken to remedy those situations.
Yes.
But then there are still some areas that would need to be identified and modified going forward.
Yes, definitely.
In the event that, for instance, it is discovered that a particular child or children has not been participating for over a month, how does the ministry plan to address those cases into the next school year? What are the plans in those special instances?
Well, first, we have to look at the reason as to why some children are not really engaging. Is it a matter of hardware or some technical problems? Because sometimes that pops up as one of the reasons they don't have access to laptop and things like that. Or is it a home situation where the mother-child relationship in terms of monitoring the process? And this is where it is important for the teachers and the parent, because we do have PTAs, and parent-teacher relationship is important in this particular case, because when we get that information, we'll be able to know how to address that, just going forward, what we need to do. And in the instance where we have children who are not engaging in the process, we will have to find some mechanism along the line as to how we really go forward to address it. As I said, if it's a hardware or technical problem, what can we do? Guys, we could give you a specific example. I know that there was one parent who had a laptop, but they had an issue with the battery. And we reached out to our technician to provide the support so that they can have that resolved. So it's those sort of things we have to look at, in detail as to how we can really assist parents as far as possible to engage in the teaching learning process. If we have persons who are delinquent, if for want of a better word, for other reasons, we will have to find out what those reasons are and move to finding some innovative mechanism to really resolve the matter. Because as I said, if we have children not engaging in the teaching learning process, irrespective of the challenges that we have for a month or two or during whatever period that we're out, it will present a challenge for us moving forward when we open school. So that is why we have to make sure we address them now, moving forward as best we can.
We are discussing education on Montserrat as we work through the COVID-19 crisis. Now, it was mentioned earlier that there is a laptop project that will be expanded. we would need at this point further details on that, including when can we expect to see this project being implemented?
Right. So I think COVID caught everybody off guard, and the transition to e-learning has been aggressive, but we do recognize the challenges, and one of them is just having the hardware, having appropriate laptops or tablets for people to access the apps or the resources that we are sending out. And so we began the process to procure several laptops, and we looked at our vulnerable populations, working with social services. We looked at some of the reports in terms of who is not engaging because they don't have items. And so we've already gone through procurement and are finalizing. So our hope is to have those on island as soon as possible. Your challenge is that you have shipping ports and different challenges there. But the reality, like the minister said, is this will change the way we do education going forward, period. And so whether the laptops get here next week or in 2 weeks, they're still going to be needed. And so it's making sure that all of our students have access to those technologies for those supplemental instruction. And that kind of goes back to what Dr. Julius was saying. Once we take a look at what are the reasons why the young people are not engaging in the classroom, and it's a hardware issue, then it's being able to provide software and resources. So someone may be behind in math, and alternatively, we would have said, come to school every day for 2 months after school to get, the necessary lessons. We may be able to say, okay, utilize these videos and these apps, and then we are only then doing supplement for 3 weeks. So we're pressing forward to make sure we have this hardware on island as soon as possible. So right now, I think the challenge is more shipping to get them on island, and more than anything else. And we know cargo is still coming, but it's to get it from our supplier and get it here as soon as possible.
Yeah, and this just reinforces the global challenges that we're facing. It's not just Montserrat in
Correct.
this, but the entire world.
Well, and I will say, this laptop hardware, software, learning management system is a challenge being had across the Caribbean. Many countries had programs similar to what we had in place, but they're realizing that, they didn't have enough laptops, or the laptops were in need of upgrade, or the tablets weren't working. So, this thing really caught a lot of people off guard. I think, as the minister said, it's interesting because in January, we as a ministry were sitting down talking about how do we update education? How do we transform it? How do we make it more innovative? How do we meet the needs of our students? And we were talking about bringing these programs online, and essentially this has put the foot on the gas that we need to get it done as soon as possible.
Can you confirm whether or not this laptop project is for primary and secondary schools?
Yes, so the quantity of laptops is based on what we've identified as vulnerable students across primary and secondary.
In terms of the children, how are they adjusting to this rapid shift in learning and teaching process? Have you had an indication to get updates from the teachers in terms of the children and how they're coping?
That's a good question. I think we'll all chime in on that, because I think there's a variety of anecdotal stories with that one. I think some of the students are challenged by the complete e-learning option. Remember, people have different learning styles. And so some people, the concept of learning online at home is very difficult. For others, they love it. And so I see we see that variety, I think, with the students. And, I think what we've been communicating, and some of the resources from UNICEF encourage that they maintain some form of schedule, that they're doing schoolwork so many hours a day. And I'm sure our parents are even enjoying that experience as well. But I think it's also challenging for the teachers. Hearing from some of the teachers, the preparation for online is very different from in person. How you deliver, how it engages, that thing. And I know some teachers who've reached out and quite frankly just said, I miss my students. I miss the face-to-face. Even when you have a Zoom classroom or Google Classroom and everybody's commenting, it's not the same, and so they themselves are challenged. And I think that's good in one sense to push them to think about it differently. But I think everybody, honestly, is trying to make that adjustment so that it works both in delivery, but in how they receive the information and quite frankly, learn.
Yes, and you also have, just like how you would have a classroom of students and they are different varying levels of ability. The same thing you have with the ICT.
Yes.
With the teachers, some teachers, I can tell you, they were actually engaging with this sort of thing long before COVID, the parent group chats and things like that. So I can sense that there are a number of teachers who are very comfortable and they would move fast ahead, whereas there are some teachers who would need the support in terms of, getting accustomed to the online version of e-learning. You have some teachers also taking it a step further. There's a competition for, I think the MAC has out, and there one class I know, they got their students to each one of them create one line, and then they put it together and they read it together. So it depends on the creativity of the teacher, but in general, I think that there is a proverb which said, necessity is the mother to invention.
Yes.
And I think, therefore, that teachers now are going to begin to realize that some of them have a lot more in them than what they thought, and some of them are more creative than what they thought. And this, I believe, will bring out a lot of creativity in the teachers as it relates to moving forward, because as I said, we don't know how long, and if it means that we're going to be for a longer haul, we are going to have to make sure it's not just engaging in the teaching learning process online, but it has to be formalized in terms of timetable and a more structured approach, so that we can get both not just the learning in terms of the math and language and social studies, but the actual emotional aspects of it, because that is important, because we need to know how children and teachers are feeling and are coping, because I think, and Mr. Skerritt is the expert on this, when it comes down to the mental part, which we haven't really spoken much about, and the psychological impact, we need to make sure that it's on board with what we're doing.
Well, I believe that, as I said earlier, the changes will have to be made. Adjustments will have to be made. And like everything else that you change, there will be those challenges. And even in a classroom setting, you have those challenges that everybody doesn't grasp at the same time. And the same thing occurs now, that there will be still those children who you'll have to push harder than you, even at home. And it's maybe a good thing for the parents now to see just exactly how the children react to learning, and maybe have a better appreciation for the teachers who teach, because now they have them home and they have to be pretty much the teachers there. They'll understand why sometimes, when we figured out we could rough up the teachers, there's a lot to go along. So all those changes and challenges have to be taken into account. But overall, I believe children and parents and teachers have been adjusting slowly but surely.
All right, it's a learning curve for all teachers, students, parents.
It is.
We know that all levels of education is important. However, I know that persons are especially concerned about the transition from grade 6 to secondary school, and also students that are getting ready to write CXC exams. Now, in the minister's opening remarks, he would have indicated that there will be no CPEA, that's the Caribbean Primary Exit Assessment. So this year, Montserrat will not be participating in that. And with regards to CXC, from what I understand, further discussions would need to be had between the Ministry of Education and CXC to determine how that will be structured. But I need you to explain this. Break this down for our listeners. Explain the ministry's position on the CPEA and also the CXC exams.
So I'll let Dr. Julius do CPEA and the assessment, and then I'll talk to the CXC element of it.
Sure.
Okay. The Caribbean Primary Exit Assessment came about primarily as it relates to the harmonization of assessment. They had the harmonization of the curriculum previously. So it means that there had to be some mechanism for the assessment part in particular. Because if a student leaves from grade 6 in Montserrat, and whether for work reasons or whatever reason they have to go to another Caribbean country and then move into secondary school, or at least make that transition, they would have some idea, because they would have had some performance report as it relates to CPEA. So CPEA in particular was what gathered that, because in our current system, we don't really utilize the performance entirely in terms of transitioning into secondary. It was more of a leveling test. And perhaps what is important here is for us to kind of have or give what you call the historical perspective as to how students have been transitioned into secondary school over the years. Previously, you had the common entrance exam, which we all knew, students sit that exam, even before it was universal, and then particular numbers were taken to secondary school. Then we had the universal or the comprehensive education, opening up secondary school to everybody, give them a fair chance. And then within that, you still had to have a mechanism or an assessment to be able to put students in the varying levels. What we had previously before CPA, you had where the first 3 terms of grade 5 and the 2 terms of grade 6 accounted for a 40% of the performance, and then the ministry put that exam together, and that was 60, and that those two combined and gave you a performance transitioning into secondary. 2010, we had education planner, Mr. Ed Davis, who did a review of the education system, and from his report, he indicated that that system was indeed a very good way of measuring the students transitioning into secondary. We had changes, and we had a situation where the changes that were taking place and the leveling tests came on board. And so over time, you can see the different stages or changes as it relates to exams. Now we have COVID. We have to now make a decision, because one of the things that we had, and we during our discussions in meetings prior to COVID, we recognized that over-testing could be a serious problem in terms of having the CPA, the leveling, and so on these exams. So we were at the stage where we were thinking of what is the one best shot assessment that we can utilize to ensure that we get a true picture of the students' performance and their abilities transitioning into secondary school, while at the same time not doing over-testing. So in actual truth and fact, we were having discussions about assessment prior to COVID. Now COVID comes on stream and it has affected the CPA. It means that if we were to even utilize CPA fully as an assessment, we won't have it because we can't do it. So as I'm saying here now, we need to now look at what existed before, what worked, and as I said, the termly reports combined with the ministry exams was something that existed and worked well. And more than likely, we would have to use that as a way forward of transitioning students into secondary school. Because one of the things we don't want is to just take them to secondary school and then try to build on that to see where they are. Because over time, students can lose information as it relates to content and the targets, the learning targets that they're supposed to have. So we are looking at a real holistic mechanism that we can utilize. But as I said, on the table, we have things that worked, and it's just a matter of us putting it together in a way to get the best measure. Whether it be the 5 terms, and the way how we're looking at things at this present moment is that I think locally, the grade 6 teachers are capable of putting, with the support of secondary and any other persons who may be as educators, to put a test together in a way that it would include leveling elements. Because leveling elements is just basically the targets, where you should be at an expected age. We are dealing with grade 6 students at this point. So I think that, we are in a position where we have the resources where locally, the grade 6 teachers, with the support of the ministry and any other stakeholders, to put a test together so that the students can be assessed and transition in secondary school. And once they reach secondary school, then we take it from there. So that is where we basically are as it relates to assessment. As I said, the CPA, we no longer would be able to do that based on the challenges. What was really happening with the CPA also was that the structure in terms of having an SBA component was perhaps useful in engaging students at an earlier stage of an SBA atmosphere, so that when they reach secondary school, they would have an idea as to what SBA is all around, and so that they can move into it smoothly. But as I said, because of the challenges, we would not be able to utilize that. But locally, we have to make sure that we have something in place. And I think there are things on the table from the past and to the present, and it's just to put it together so that our students are assessed properly.
All right, thanks for explaining that, Dr.
I just want to come in there a bit, because on going into the ministry, one of the things I looked at was the amount of exams these children at grade 6 were having. I think they had about 3 exams at grade 6. And even sitting in a meeting of OECS where I understand the director had commented, as I thought, there were too many exams for the grade 6 children. And since the whole aim is to ensure that they would be at a certain level for secondary school, what we had done in, I think it's January, was it? When we had a meeting with the teachers and the officials, we decided that at grade 2 and grade 4, is it grade 2 and grade 4, I think we would have some of these exams so that you test where the children are at and you capture them earlier, knowing what level they're at, rather than waiting and having everything done at grade 6 when they're ready to go into secondary school. One would expect that some of these things should be corrected by grade 6 so that the whole leveling would be easier to deal with, rather than waiting until the end of your primary school to be checking to see whether you're up to marks or not. So what we're looking at going forward, even before COVID, is to ensure that the children, the curricula and everything is being taught up to a certain level by grade 6 and checked by these exams going through. Because if we are saying that it's for where the children are at, in grade 6, one exam, whether it is leveling or CPEA, whatever, or and the regular school exams, that exam should in fact incorporate everything that one needs at that point, so the children have one exam. So whatever you want for level should be in it, rather than having 3 separate exams at that level. And that's what we were planning before. I think it comes to the fore now that COVID has thing and maybe make it easier to transition at this point.
Okay, thank you for that point, Minister. Mr. Skerritt?
Yes. So the on the CXC side, we would have been engaged by CXC and Dr. Wesley regarding their plans going forward, and they were looking at a variety of options. When we came back together, they proposed what I think was published, and that is doing paper 1 and then everything being through e-testing as well as SPAs. We would have provided feedback from speaking with the teachers, from speaking with Mrs. KB and the college, and I think you've seen a lot of feedback to CXC for a variety of reasons regarding that proposal. And the timeline was for June and July. And I would say that we were reminded yesterday, I was reminded talking to our local registrar that was a tentative schedule. So we did write to CXC, and actually Dr. Wesley called us yesterday. And we had a very good talk, and I think what they're trying to do is have a position for how they want to administer tests going forward. And I think we were in agreement that he understands that countries will be in very different places. And so if necessary, and we do need to do printed, we will do printed papers, and we will move forward from there. So our plan, again, was, and we had already engaged our educational technician with regards to the necessary updates and increase of capacity for us to do e-testing fully on Montserrat. And so, again, this kind of presses it forward, and how quickly can we get there? But in the interim, we recognize that in some instances we're not there yet, and it will be a phased approach through the transition. And so that's what we're going to do. But Dr. Wesley also made it clear from the feedback that he has received that many countries feel like the June-July schedule was a little premature, and then the e-testing challenges. And so we have a call again regionally. There's an administration and finance committee for CXC in which the permanent secretaries sit on, and we meet again on Friday. And I think they will be presenting updates on the options going forward, recognizing that countries are in very different places.
Okay, we'll take this caller. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning. You're live on Radio Montserrat.
Okay, thank you for having me. This is Geraldine KB, Principal, Montserrat Community College. I just want to say I wish to commend the Honorable Minister, Mr. Liston Skerritt, Acting PS, and Dr. Julius, our Director of Education, for coming to the airways and giving this profound feedback on what is happening in terms of the, unprecedented position that we find ourselves in terms of the delivery of education. Literally overnight, we had to transition from one mode of teaching, learning to this modified approach. I'm saying modified approach because we did not have a real online teaching learning platform. None of the institutions on Montserrat truly were in that position to just lock down one system and upload another. What I've tried to do during this time also is to try and reach out to all the students, because I know that lecturers tried valiantly to continue the engagement of students through whatever means, WhatsApp, Zoom. I think Mr. Skerritt mentioned all of them before. So I reached out to the students to find out exactly what quality they were receiving. And to be very honest, the students are complaining. This is novel for them. It is also not an ideal form of delivery for many of the students, because students do need the direct contact with their tutors. So nevertheless, we have tried, but I think that there really requires some assessment in terms of what we can or cannot do in this mode of teaching, learning environment. I do apologize because I'm actually in line for grocery, so I'm on the street as I call you.
We understand.
Yes. So hear me now. There are also some courses that really, it doesn't matter the design of the online platform, you cannot truly teach in that modality. And those subjects are the science subjects, mathematics, all levels of mathematics. You just cannot truly teach the students. And the students have said that. I have the feedback which I'm going to share with the Ministry of Education, because as I said, I contacted each of the students and asked them to give me your very frank position, because I wanted I wasn't going to be. I told them, you are not upsetting me. Let us know exactly how you are functioning. And many of them have indicated, about 95% of them have said that they would not want this for the Montserrat Community College. While they appreciate the online platform, they think it should be used for revision, or if at best a lecturer cannot come to class today and because of their illness or they're overseas on whatever, then they can do it temporarily. But they really do not want this. That was and I'm giving you the statistics, because I remember Dr. Julius mentioned about getting the feedback from principals. So I'm thinking that, yes, online platforms are there, but truly, unless there's some strengthening, some deepening, the platforms are not truly geared to deal with delivery in the real sense. The way that students really want to be taught, and that is a fact. I think once you have the basics and you're doing your upgrading, your educational upgrading, you don't mind the online education because you have a base. But for primary school, secondary, and even college level students, we cannot have it as our primary mode of delivery. That's what I'm getting from the students. The other thing is the infrastructure, the enabling environment. That is, we have had, I tried, as I said, valiantly again, to teach pure mathematics using Zoom. And every 2 minutes we were down because the infrastructure, the internet, all of that, it was just a total waste of time, because the students we were in contact for less than was any meaningful exchange could have taken place. So that again is a setback unless we are going to be upgrading what we currently have to sustain this type of environment, we can't do it with the current infrastructure that we have on Montserrat. So that is my little submission. I am saying, don't get me wrong, we are trying. We have to try for the students' sake.
Yes.
I really am grateful that I'm actually not only serving as principal, that I have, direct, experience, because I'm actually serving, as I said, for one course. So I get the frustration from both lecturers and students, because I actually have to be in on the delivery side. But nevertheless, I want to say kudos to you, to all the attempts being made by the Ministry of Education to, provide some sense of continuity for teaching and learning to continue. Thank you very much. I don't know if I'll get a chance to listen to you, because it's almost my turn to go inside the door now. So thank you very much. All right, so that is just the feedback. I wanted to give that feedback to you so that you understand. I don't know if any student would want to call in having listened to me. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your input.
Bye-bye. Yes, bye.
Yes. And, I could add as well that challenge is not unique to Montserrat, because I've been reading articles from children in the U.S. who were expressing similar feelings and wanting to go back into the classroom setting. Before we go back to that question about CXC, I'm not sure if you wanted to address anything that was raised by that caller.
Yes, Madam Principal did raise a number of issues. And during, I think, our last meeting as administrators and education officials, we recognized that even transitioning into reopening, that in itself would present a challenge. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that was tabled or methodology to move up a bit from just the online is really producing videos. Mm-hmm. Because when a teacher teach a class but is being videoed, it's actually teaching a class or teaching a lesson, whether it be maths or science. So having a video of a teacher teaching that particular concept, teaching that particular topic in whatever area, and then use the appropriate medium to get it onto the students, which is something slightly different from just them going on a website and seeing information and trying to follow it. Because here you will have the teacher explaining or performing the task as though he or she would have been in the practical classroom. And I think that was something that was tabled, and that is something I think that we can move towards to facilitate or at least supplement what is happening, because currently we do understand, and the caller, the principal, kind of allude to that there are many challenges, and in terms of the modality that or the preference that some students may wish to learn. So this is something that we are exploring. We have the local radio station, for example. There's a possibility of, because you do have problems with the bandwidth and the internet, perhaps utilizing that local station to actually show the videos of the lessons being taught. So you have a number of grade 4 students across the island. You get the grade 4 teachers can come together and decide how they're going to put that lesson together in a video, and that is shown. You schedule a timetable. Okay, that will be on 9:30. So students in grade 4, what we have to make sure that everybody has television, because they're always going to be issue of hardware, have television or the internet. And so we recognize the challenge, but I think that we have to really look at other options to kind of bring it as close to home in terms of being in the classroom, because we know unless we are out of the red in terms of social distancing, going back into the classroom as normal is going to be always the major challenge. Mm-hmm. So until we reach that stage, which we call the ideal stage, how can we move and utilize the different mediums and innovations to bring it as close as possible to the students in terms of the teaching and learning of the various subjects? And the video is perhaps one of the ways we're exploring.
I think this goes back to a conversation we had at a time with Dr. Barnes, and we were talking about metacognition and thinking about the way we think, right? And so a lot of young people have their learning styles, but their preferences are developed over time. If you're transitioning to a full e-learning system, or you're utilizing e-learning more, it is very difficult to start at a later stage. Right, so we're talking about transitioning our young people as early as K and 1 that they are more comfortable with this platform, so that as they progress over time, so you're talking about a system change, and I think the principal highlights the fact that you have individuals who've gone basically all of their life learning a particular way, and with very little transition, you ask them to change. And I think we have to speak to people's loss and again, their comfort and their mental health of how they learn and how they engage. And I agree with her. I think there's certain things that yes, you could do video, but that concept of somebody there showing you how to work it out. I think the math one is probably a key example. And so we know that, and I think the minister spoke to, we're trying to maintain a basic level of education, but there's some challenges that, hopefully we get back to being in the classroom to address.
Shall.
Yeah.
Right.
And we shall.
And we shall.
The thing is that the human is meant to be gregarious, and nothing will replace that at any time. And I think we have to understand why, while we have to go through this mode at this point, I expect that we will get back to where you have your classrooms and people can say, I don't believe we want to live in a world like robots. So our whole aim is to get back to what was, and I think when the Creator made man, he made him to be gregarious, not to be a robot. And while we have to observe certain things now, I expect that and learn from them, as the caller was speaking, is that we have to learn and adjust. There's nothing fixed or cast in stones at this point in time. And we are not agreeing to everything because it's maybe handed down to us. We are going to take it. Montserrat is our base, and we have to see what is best for us within the whole global picture. How we fit in. We can't just take everything lock, stock, and barrel, because we still want our students to have a rounded life and not one from their rooms every day to school. So I expect that within short time, I expect that we shall go back to being normal human beings, because it seems that there's a plan to get us all 6 feet one way or the other. And I think that in every pandemic, people have survived. And in fact, the last one they claim was for the last 100 years. Therefore, there's still hope for us. And while we learn and we adjust and use the technology that's available, we will want to get back where people can be people again.
I want to just share with the CPEA position, because I am getting text messages and questions at the same time.
Calls are coming in as well.
Yes.
So, yes.
Just to clarify with the CPEA, CXC has not established a position for CPEA. They are focusing on CXC and CAPE, CSEC and CAPE. Yeah. And so actually right now they have, to our knowledge, no published plans. So this is the government and the ministry being proactive in how we are going to address the transition of our students in grade 6 this year. It falls in line with a larger conversation, and we will be working to figure out how we move forward. But we are making sure that we don't end up in a situation where we're waiting on them and we then end up with no solution or action. So I think Dr. Julius's plan is very, and I support it full-heartedly, and I hope parents understand that there is no plan in place from CXC. So this is Montserrat saying we're not waiting. We're going to make sure we know what we're doing to take care of our children as we go forward.
Now, Mr. Skerritt, it's important that we go back to that point about CXC, particularly for those fifth formers who are getting ready to write exams. You would have earlier mentioned that CXC, the regional body, and the Ministry of Education are still exploring options for the examination.
And I think the most important thing is our students have to continue to prepare, because the reality of it is this test will come in some form or format. We recognize that might create a little bit of tension, a little bit of stress. You're uncertain. But our teachers, the teachers are active at different levels. But one of the places that we know our teachers are active are with our fifth form students. Completion of school-based assessments, best they can within the conditions that are available. Actually, at secondary school today, some of the teachers, we've gotten them passes. They're going there now to get books and resources from their classroom. I know we're going to be delivering computers to technical drawing students so that they can finish their SBAs. So as Mrs. KB said, there are some subjects subjects that we'll just have to wait: electricity, building, construction, those. But best we can, we're trying to finish the school-based assessment. So that's phase one. Phase two then is, how do we do that preparation for the exam in whatever form or format it's coming? And the reality of it, they should continue to prepare for a paper one and a paper two. And if something less comes, then it works in your favor. But don't under-prepare, saying that, well, we're only going to have online, or we're only going to have paper one. They should prepare as they would usually prepare. And I'm going to encourage students and parents to do that. And then when the modality or the format is announced, then they can make the adjustment at the end. So this time should be spent like they normally would between the end of their SPAs and the exam, doing their cue cards, doing their flash drive, their flash preparations, doing sample papers or past papers. And some teachers I know continue to press that. And I think they should continue down those lines until the format and the timeline is announced.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. We'll go to a caller on the line.
Thank you very much for coming out and having a conversation with the public and with parents and other beneficiaries of the education system. When I listen, I have to wonder, I wonder what is happening within the primary schools, because I am aware that about 3 years ago, there was a project that was funded by the Basic Needs Trust Fund to enhance ICT, both learning and teaching in the primary schools, right? I was aware that a study was done on how ICT was being incorporated in the education system. And one of the things that was revealed was that in the public schools, the teachers were engaging in a number of ICT modes in delivering their lessons and in communicating amongst themselves and communicating with parents, right? I know also a result from that project was that teachers were given laptops in the public schools. Classrooms had interactive whiteboards. And as I said, there was an ongoing engagement with parents. I am curious to know if all primary school children in Montserrat, when they leave, they are all going to the Montserrat Secondary School. What type of support is there from the ministry to give to the St. Augustine Primary School? Right? Because as I said, in the public schools, they have these interactive whiteboards, they have laptops, they are using ICT, but those things are absent at St. Augustine School, right? So I want to know what support is there for St. Augustine School, for the teachers, for the parents. I also want to know if support is coming in the form of equipment and training and so forth, right? How will the ministry monitor the schools to ensure that these new way of learning, the equipment is being utilized, and teaching and learning is actually taking place, right? I'm saying that to say that I'm a parent, right? And yes, I know in light of COVID, I have to now take on the role of teacher, right? And I've taken on the role, but I felt as though I'm being left in the Atlantic Ocean to swim along the current. And it's a new environment for me, right? And it's like ICT is like barely absent from the whole setting for my two children who attend the school, right? And I am concerned that whereas we think of education, some are advancing as related to ICT and some are being left behind because in education planning in years gone by, there was a focus on enhancing the capacity of the public schools, and then this school is left behind, and they are teaching our children. Thank you very much.
So I want to say thank you to the caller for calling. Whether directly, anecdotally, I probably know a little bit about that private school. So I will speak to the fact that the government does support that school annually with a variety of ways, and training and development is available to that school. Through another hat that I wear, as a member of the Montserrat Rotary Club, I know that school has been given a grant and is also similarly in the process of procuring laptops, just like the government schools are. So support is coming to that school in a different way. Regarding your particular complaint, I don't think necessarily we want to speak to that. That might be a little bit inappropriate. I think that needs to be directed more so to the school. But I can also say that I know that that school is active with their Google Classroom in the delivery of resources and teaching to their students. So the school does work with the ministry. The education officer does follow up with that school. They do meet our standards. But if the parent has more complaints in how it's exactly being done, I think that should be directed more so to the school. We note the concern and we will follow up accordingly from our end. But Fiona, just to close out on the CXC conversation, so I spoke to CPEA and to CSEC, and as I said, we really want to see our students continue to prepare for exams, and we understand as we transition forward, some kind of arrangement will be made for them because, say for example, we're transitioning and it is in July. Normally this cohort has already moved out of the school system. So something would have to be done to make sure that they're coming back together, staying fresh on content and materials, working with teachers so that they stay as abreast for preparation to the exam as possible.
Now, I'm getting a question here regarding preschoolers and whether or not, I know we were focusing a lot on primary and secondary education, but in terms of the preschools, can we expect that the children would advance to the next level, especially those who are in their final year of preschool? Would they automatically advance now to primary school come July, August?
Well, just to give you feedback from the officer responsible for early childhood, Mrs. Ines Thompson, one of the things that she said she did when we had our last meeting was to really, first of all, check the wellness check of her staff members. And she has been participating with UNICEF Zoom meetings that, and have invited parents. And the meetings focus on activities for children under the age of 3 and so on. So we know that at the early childhood, the focus is really on stimulation to develop the prerequisite skills to enter, the second stage or the next stage, which is primary. So while the indication, the focus is on primary, secondary, and tertiary, which is the college. We haven't really left the early childhood sector out, but we know that this is an opportunity for parents in particular to engage with their children and provide stimulation as far as possible within the house for the children, so that when we do return, that stimulation would continue. I would want to go back to how many years ago when I was raised by my grandmother, and whenever she has the time, she makes sure that little sound, little letters, do little things, and so on. So it's those sort of things I'm expecting that the parents now at home are engaging with, which is basically what they'll be doing by extension when they go into our centers, because the focus is not really on formal learning. It's just to prepare them with readiness skills so that when they enter nurseries, what we call kindergarten or the first stage of primary, they're well prepared. They have those readiness skills. And of course, even at that level, children are going to have varying abilities. Some are going to advance faster than some because of the mental faculty or whatever atmosphere, environment, supporting thing is made for them. So I don't think we have any major problem there. And if we do have students going or transforming into our primary schools at kindergarten and they do have deficiencies, it's just for us to make sure that we have the mechanism in place to support them so that when they leave kindergarten, that is what is key, because it's the foundation. They have all the prerequisite skills so that they can build on from grade 1 right up to grade 6 and transition in secondary school, because education is really a learning process. So we do have them, and as I said, the early childhood officer is really keeping in touch with the principals as far as we know in terms of, what is happening.
I think Dr. Julius reminded me of a comment or a contribution made by our education officer planner. And let me pause and say thank you to the entire education team, because we've had several calls and the knowledge base in that team from the contributions of the OECS, UNICEF, UNESCO, and they're bringing it all to bear in how we're doing things. So we have several education officers. Just want to say thank you to all of them. But Ms. Bramble Brown raised a point, and I think we recognize that going forward, we will have to do some form of supplemental instruction or remedial classes as necessary. So one of the processes at the end of this is going to be working with teachers to understand, you were supposed to cover this material in second term or third term. You did not get it covered. This person is advancing to the next grade or the next form. Where is the room for us to fill in those gaps of missed information? Again, understanding that education is building blocks. So something that they did not get in that previous term, they might need to advance to the next topic or area of instruction. And so we recognize that part of this process is going to be evaluating what was missed as we wrap up the semester. And do we need to do that through a 1 week, 1 weekend, summer, or does the teacher of the next grade feel that everything can be covered in that next term to make up the necessary instruction?
Now that you've mentioned supplementary classes, do you foresee children or students having to attend school during the summer break period to make up for any lost time?
I don't think we're making a definitive decision on that yet. I think that just depends on how much teaching time has been missed. I look to Dr. Julius to advise on this one. And can that be made up in the regular term, or does it need actual supplemental? I was talking to one teacher yesterday as we were making copies, and they were saying, they felt that at lower school in primary, that is something that could be made up in the regular teaching time, the 1 or 2 topics that were not covered. But that might be a little bit more difficult for upper school, primary, or secondary school. So I think it's subjective.
Yes, and because there is a strong relationship between contact time, which is the actual time you use to deliver your curriculum, your different subject areas, and the academic year. Because the academic year is structured in such a way in terms of weeks, because the anticipation is that within the 40 weeks or the 39 weeks, you will be able to comfortably cover, review, and assess students within that year. So it means now we have, the challenge of the crisis. It will, of course, set us back in terms of meeting those targets as it relates to the relationship between the contact time and the actual time that you have in the calendar year. So based on the assessment moving forward, it will give us a good idea as to what we need to do, as you alluded to, in terms of extending or putting things in summer and things like that. We have already start looking at that. What are some of the metrics we can look at in terms of extra time, or when are we going to close school, reopen school, and things like that. Because it is important that, as I said, there's a relationship between contact time, which is the teaching time, and the academic year in terms of what time is really allocated to comfortably cover those subjects. So based on what we see coming out of this, we'll be able to know, okay, we may need to do this in terms of extra time, at what level, who are at greater loss, and what do we need to do. Because some of this can also come under what we know, especially at secondary school and even at primary school, extracurricular activity. Because extracurricular activity doesn't have to be always sports and things of the like. It may very well mean remediation to support those students who really need that, to really bring them up to the level that they need supposed to be.
Now, I know we're getting ready to wind up this discussion, but you may or may not at this point be able to indicate, obviously we can't say when schools will be reopening. That is clear. We cannot say that. But at this point, I'm sure the ministry has started to think about what would happen whenever that time comes and how that will be phased in terms of reopening the educational institutions. Does the ministry currently have a plan formulated as to how they envision this to happen? Whether it's a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months from now, whenever that happens, are we starting to think about how we would want to see that rolled out?
We are in fact making a plan not only for education but the whole rollout after lockdown. And I do not think that we want from education now to be pinpointing anything, rather just to say that we are looking at that and it will be part of the overall plan as how you come out of lockdown, rather than just an education thing. So at another such briefing, we will deal with that matter as appropriate.
Right.
I think, Fiona, we are making sure we pay attention to what people's concerns are. So we do have a list of things. Whatever plan we have, It needs to factor in the advice by the health ministry. It needs to look at the safety for the students and the teachers and the parents. It needs to look at transportation. It needs to look at completion of curriculum. So we're looking at all of those things. So we have a long list, and we're making sure that whatever plan we have includes that we factor in all of those details.
And I know there are other questions that people would have, but we are approaching that time when we do have to wrap up. And I'm sure the officials from the Ministry of Education will provide further updates as we continue to go through this process in terms of COVID-19. So at this point, I'm going to ask for final comments and thoughts from the members of the panel, starting first with the Director of Education, then the Permanent Secretary, and ending with the Minister of Education.
Yes, thank you, Fiona. And let me say thank you also to the listening audience. We have discussed a number of critical areas as it relates to education and the response to the COVID crisis. And I must say that I would also like to take this opportunity to really thank Ministry headquarters and staff and the school, the different sectors, for their input. We know that it is a challenge, but I think that with whatever resources available, we're putting our best foot forward. And where there are weaknesses, I think that we are willing to make those gaps, put those things in place to make sure that we strengthen what we're doing moving forward. Obviously, moving forward is also determining on where we are in terms of a country overall. So going back to what Mr. Skerritt has said, we have discussed some options, yes, but we just have to put them in what I consider a matrix. And the matrix will determine how we operate based on the situation we're in. So I will leave it there, but just to close by saying that we are in all this together, and I think that everybody, all stakeholders are doing whatever they can in the current circumstances to make sure that what I dubbed operating, that is education in emergency, because it's always a challenging. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Julius. Now, Mr. Skerritt.
Yeah, I just want to take a moment and think about the challenge that this has been to so many people through the pandemic, from students to teachers to administrators to headquarters. This has been a very interesting challenge to our professional knowledge and our ability to execute education. And everybody should be commended, from the students participating themselves. And I know it's challenging. There could be a million other things they'd rather do at home than study and do schoolwork. But I think it's continuing to develop themselves, because this will not last forever. And we want to make sure that we're in a good place when we come out of it. So I just want to recognize people in those different positions and say thank you to them. The parents who are now full-time teachers and parents and working, and doing all that at home, I recognize that is not easy. It's funny to see people's Facebook statuses and WhatsApp statuses talking about, in one day you had to be, your job, your parent, your teacher, your pastor, you're doing all of these things. And so thank you. Thank you for working with us through a challenging time. I recognize that it's not ideal. I think we all recognize that. I think we all recognize that there's gaps, but please continue to give us your feedback. Please continue to reach out. Please continue to let us know where there's areas that we can focus on to make this a little bit easier to all people involved.
Thank you, Mr. Skerritt. And now, Minister, your final thoughts.
There's a saying that encouragement is half a laborer's pay. So I will start by thanking the PS Director and the education team for the work they have been doing, and the teachers and all of the auxiliary staff for all the work they've been doing throughout this COVID-19 session. I want to end by a note to the parents. I ask you, while you help your children, help them to grasp whatever concepts they must grasp. And whatever, at the end of the day, make sure you are not the one doing the work. And teachers, ensure that the children are getting the best education that they can through these mediums. And to you, the children, do your work.